Namaskar.
Namaskar.
How are you, Mr. Chauhan?
Great, Puneet. How are you?
Fantastic. How's your day nowadays?
Excellent. Corona is there, but this is a good time for us to do the broadcasting on Indian history. And I look forward to hearing your research on the 1857 events.
Sure. Welcome to my show. My name is Puneet Singh Mehra. And most of you know my show name is, but again, I'm going to repeat it one more time. My show name is Valor and Wisdom. And again, today I'm going to talk about the valor part. So for today, again, we have a special guest who is the author of Love in the Empire, Mr. Jay Chauhan. Hello, Mr. Chauhan.
Hello. Excellent, Puneet. Yes, you're right there. I wrote this novel, Puneet, about the period from roughly 50s to the late 70s in the post-war period when India became independent and how were we treated in the British Raj. And today I look forward to hearing your story in what happened around 150 years ago.
Sure.
Good.
So again today, is for all my Indians, again today I'm here with the untold history of a valor of one Rajput. His name was Veer Kunwar Singh. So Veer Kunwar Singh was born in 1777 in Bihar in India. He belongs to Ujjain Rajput. We don't know about the much story about the childhood, but we only know about his valor when he was an old guy. So Veer Kunwar Singh got his bravery and courage from his father. His father is also a freedom fighter who fought against all the Britishers, even with the Mughals. Not only a warrior, Veer Kunwar Singh started his campaign towards reforestation to grow much trees and everything. Kunwar Singh is also a very fair and a very good king towards his people. However, Veer Kunwar Singh was the biggest obstacle for British East India Company. Yes, Veer Kunwar Singh was very excellent in guerrilla warfare, which he was learned from Chhatrapati Shivaji Maharaj. And for those tactics, Britishers always puzzled every single time. In 1857 to 1859, the jungle of Jagdishpur was so beautifully constructed by the Veer Kunwar Singh that only the Kunwar Singh and his troops know the entrance and the exit. And for the British, it was the biggest obstacle. When the Indian revolt happened in 1857, Veer Kunwar Singh lost his parents, his older brother. Only his younger brother, who was stood with Veer Kunwar Singh and fight with Britishers till last breath. During 1857, Veer Kunwar Singh was almost 80 years old and his health was failing him. However, he dedicated himself to liberate his motherland from the Britishers. During this time, he fought many wars against Britishers. On 27 July, Veer Kunwar Singh liberated Jagdishpur and Ara from the Union Jack. And after that battle, Union Jack was lying on the ground. On August 3, when Britishers was so much of angerness because they lost to Veer Kunwar Singh, British Major Vincent came with his force to defeat Kunwar Singh. However, the defeat word is not in the dictionary of Veer Kunwar Singh. Veer Kunwar Singh and his troops attacked again and liberated Azamgarh from the hand of the British rule. And again, the Union Jack was on the ground. The Britishers tried to do many war against Kunwar Singh, but every single time they lost because Veer Kunwar Singh was so excellent with the guerrilla warfare that Britishers always got defeated. When Britishers got this information that all the Britishers are defeated to Veer Kunwar Singh. There is one British brigadier, Douglas. So Brigadier Douglas was so frustrated with the tactics of Kunwar Singh that he sent all his troops to defeat Kunwar Singh. And I think Brigadier Douglas forgot one rule of war, that if you fight against your enemy, you never send your entire troop to fight against a single warrior. And that's the mistake he did. On 22 April 1858, Veer Kunwar Singh fought his ultimate battle of his life. In this battle, an 80-year-old Rajput warrior had managed to defeat British soldiers who are much younger than him. And in this battle, a bullet had struck left arm of Veer Kunwar Singh, which Veer Kunwar Singh realized that his wound was severe and additional risk of infection. So as the Rajput, he drew out his sword and cut his hand and offered it to Mother Ganga. That's how much valor Veer Kunwar Singh he was. Even there's one British historian, he wrote something about the valor of Kunwar Singh, which he wrote, I quote, "The old Rajput fought with the ultimate bravery against the British rule. It was our luck that he was 80 years old. Had he been any younger, the British would have left India by 1857 itself." After that battle, Veer Kunwar Singh slay all the British troops. Britishers had conceded defeat, and again the Union Jack was on the ground. And after the battle, the saffron flag of Jagdishpur was fluttering on the fort. This is the valor of a Veer Kunwar Singh. And on 1858, Veer Kunwar Singh, he took his last breath, but he was undefeated. He defeated Britishers so badly that the Britishers never dared to attack Veer Kunwar Singh. And when he knew about the valor of Veer Kunwar Singh, they all shocked. But the main concept is like now today, every Indian forget about the Veer Kunwar Singh. Because of the Veer Kunwar Singh, that the Britishers are so badly humiliated and defeated by this warrior. So there is one guy which is a Britisher, and everyone know about this person. His name was Macaulay. So he sent a letter to British, which I'm going to tell every one of you. So which I quote. He wrote something about India. I quote, "I have traveled across the length and breadth of India, and I have not seen one person who is a beggar, who is a thief. Such wealth I have seen in this country, such high moral values, people of such caliber, that I do not think we would ever conquer this country unless we break the very backbone of this nation, which is her spiritual and cultural heritage. And therefore, I propose that we replace her old and ancient education system, her culture, for if the Indians think that all that is the foreign and English is good and greater than their own language and their culture, they will lose their self-esteem, their native culture, and they will become what we want them, a truly dominated nation." That's how a British fought against us. And I'll tell you one more thing. We never lost to Britishers. We only lost to our own people. And this is the truth. So this is one part of our history which every Indians are forgetting. So Mr. Chauhan, what do you think about this part of history of a Veer Kunwar Singh?
First of all, I want to note actually that you're very young. Puneet, at your age, very young age, you are a Singh.
Yes.
And Veer Kunwar Singh was a Singh as well.
Yeah.
So your ancestors were busy defending India.
Yes.
And we are Chauhans. And
Yes.
my father, just to tell you the story, my father also in 1938 and 39 also stood up during the British Raj period before the Second World War and spoke in Rajkot where Gandhi used to speak. And for simply in his own country to speak up for independence of his own country, he was put into jail. And he lost his job as a teacher, and he had to leave for East Africa. And I was born in East Africa for that reason. So I'm always a visitor, but I speak still very connected, full Gujarati, fluently. And I speak a little bit of learning from Hindi from you. आपके साथ हम हिंदी में बात करेंगे.
जी.
Because the history does not stop because you migrate to another country. So now you and I live in Canada.
Yes.
And the challenge for you and me is that what contribution are we going to make to this society?
Yeah.
That's the challenge. So I want our Indian people to listen to this video and be inspired by the stories that you're telling. So I just want to touch upon that story that you made a comment on a few issues actually. Issue number one, that I am absolutely impressed with the valor of Veer Kunwar Singh, that he stood up to the British East India Company.
So just he was 80 years old, Mr. Chauhan. 80, not even a young guy.
Puneet, I'm getting there myself, actually. So I'm just close to 80 right now, but I have not lost my Chauhan spirit.
Yes.
Of now we were fighting we did one video on Prithviraj Chauhan, and I believe he could be our ancestor because he was a Gujarati. So you are from North India and we were from the west part of India, but we have something in common, Puneet, actually, that we're going to continue the spirit of our civilization forwards. But in talking about that civilization, I just want to touch upon a couple of things that you mentioned. So first of all, Veer Kunwar Singh was fighting the British East India Company. So let me just tell you actually what happened to British India Company. 1600, the British East India Company was incorporated in Britain actually as an English company. They knew that Indian people had spices, which they needed. They also knew that we had the silk, administration, culture, and history that Macaulay pointed out.
And money.
We were the richest nation for 1500 years, even during the Muslim period, until the British came in 1857 that you described. What you described as a revolt is the expression of the British people in their history. It's not a revolt in our history. In our history is a war of independence. That's outsiders who come to our country, take over, and expect in 1858, after East India Company using Indian soldiers who didn't have the proper sense of loyalty at that time. Instead of fighting for our own people, they were fighting for the British leadership and turn over the Indian Delhi to the British Parliament.
True.
And the English Queen became the Empress of India. So that's our history. So when you say about Veer Kunwar Singh, he is basically fighting British India Company that get their own soldiers. So you go back to the time how British East India Company came to India. An MP of the British Parliament came from James I to Jahangir, ruling at that time in 1614, and brought a letter and said to Jahangir in his Diwan-e-Am in Delhi, "Can we trade with you?" And he wrote a nice letter in a language and said yes. At that time, Portuguese were very important traders and dominated a lot of the trading in India. And the British wanted exclusive trade in India with a view to controlling the whole of the trade of India, ruling and making rules in England for Indian. And the idea was you take out all the natural resources of India and put them to England to industrialize their society. That was the object. 1857, it was not a war, it's not a revolt as they describe. It's not revolt. To give you an idea that in India, Gandhiji was tried many times for sedition and treason. So a British Parliament, without allowing Indian people to rule themselves, required Indian people to owe a duty of loyalty to the British Crown. And then the East India Company came as traders and turned around and created police force and a military force for a private business enterprise and took over Delhi.
Yeah.
That's the history that the Western writers have forgotten to tell the rest of the world. So it's your job and my job to bring back the history in a proper perspective.
True, Mr. John. Sure, Mr. John.
So I think that it is very good that we reflect on history. The bygones are bygones. We learned a lot from the British, actually. You and I, by the way, we are speaking in English language, and they brought the English language to us. And we learned their language. And when Macaulay said, we will have to destroy the backbone of their civilization, that succeeded, actually. We saw that their organization, their universities, their medical science, their economic science, they were all ahead of us at that time. So instead of allowing us to industrialize and trade as equal nations, they took over and subjugated the Indian, but not only subjugated the economic resources of the country, they subjugated our spirit of being equal and having a civilization that is older than their civilization. So our idea is not to put them down. We learned something from there. But their idea, as we see in the George Floyd case, actually, like they did to slavery.
Yeah.
In slavery, when the slaves were emancipated, they didn't compensate them. So when India became independent, Shashi Tharoor has argued that the resources looted from India are billions of dollars. In
41 trillions.
Okay, I didn't know the number.
41 trillions
And
the British loot from India.
And England cannot afford to pay it back to India. But you will see that India is now the fourth biggest economy in the world. They're very close to surpassing the British economy. Some of the biggest business people like Tata and Mittal are doing trade in England. And now today we have business people who will basically trade, and India will be a business partner because we have perfected the English language. As China declines in their influence around the world with the corona and issues that are happening in their Muslim communities in China, we as a tolerant people in the Hindu background, we will have the advantage of free spirit and enterprise. And we have a huge Indian population of young people of your age that need to be inspired to say that let's bring India back to number one it was for centuries.
Yes. And Mr. John, we Hinduism, we Sanatan, we always believe in one thing, that karma. See the karma? In 17th century, British ruled India. And in 21st century, Indian ruled British East India Company. This is the karma.
I think we should continue our history of compassion, support. Indian history produced the history of religions.
Yeah.
The Hindu religion spread in the Southeast Asia is a religion of compassion. Buddhism and Jainism came out of the Hindu religion that was spread in China, Japan.
Yeah.
And China had accepted until they created their own different changes. So it's no longer a dominant religion in China, but China had adopted. Their scholars used to come to India.
Yes.
In Nalanda and other Takshila universities that we talked about in another program. Yeah. So it is now a world of economic dominance. But in the economic dominance, the Indian people will prevail in terms of their intellectual power, which they are doing already. There are 2 cabinet ministers in the British cabinet now. There are quite a few 20 MPs in the Canadian Parliament. There are the top executives of some major companies like Microsoft and Google today in America. So we're comfortable in the English language. We're comfortable with their civilization. We're now trying to approach and understand each other's civilization so they recognize that we have the talent and will prevail. Not as rulers, but as people will share the civilization together to make a new civilization of the world put together.
Sure. Sure, Mr. Chauhan. Sure.
Okay. Good. It was a great program. I really enjoyed it.
Thank you so much, Chauhan. And to all my Indians, learn from the history. आपस में मत लड़ो. संगठन में शक्ति तो हर किसी की फटती. So that's a message. Namaskar, Mr. Chauhan.
Namaskar.
Take care.
See you.